It began with a storm, not of wind or rain, but of voices rising like a tempest beneath the soaring dome of the Capitol rotunda. The halls were humming, vibrating with the echoes of words slung like stones, words that would ricochet across the nation by sundown. The moment itself was electric. "I'm sorry, Senator," Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez said, her voice calm but unmistakably sharp. "But if you're going to pretend ignorance, don't dress it up like a folksy charm. You're not a hillbilly. You're just hiding behind one." A hush fell like a guillotine. Senator John Kennedy blinked. Slowly. The Louisiana Republican, known for his molasses, slow drawl and penchant for self-deprecating quotes that sounded like they came from a Mark Twain fever dream, tilted his head. Then he gave a half-smile, the kind a rattlesnake might offer right before it strikes. It was all captured on C-SPAN, unfiltered, unapologetic. But what happened next, no one saw coming. Alexandria had grown up in the Bronx, in a 2-bedroom apartment that smelled of rose-con gandules on Sundays and bleach every other day. Her mother worked as a housekeeper, her father as an architect, until cancer took him when she was 19. She studied, fought, marched, cried, studied more. Her drive was not born of ambition but of necessity. Her dreams weren't abstract, they had names. Abula, Mom, Julian, her old neighbor who died waiting for insulin. John Kennedy, by contrast, came from Mississippi roots but had studied at Oxford. He could speak fluent legalese, but chose homespun analogies, comparing legislation to everything from crawfish boils to goat rodeos. People underestimated him. Some even mocked him. But he knew exactly what he was doing. His dream wasn't to climb higher, but to preserve what he believed was falling apart. They were two people orbiting opposite stars, destined to collide. The exchange began in a Judiciary Committee hearing on tech monopolies. It wasn't personal, at first. Alexandria had been grilling a CEO over worker surveillance. When Kennedy chuckled and muttered, "She talks like she's auditioning for a TED Talk," as she heard him. "Turned? Excuse me?" she asked, arching a brow. "I just said," he repeated louder this time, "you like soundin' smart, but sometimes a little plain speakin' works better for the rest of us hillbillies." The words stung, not for their content, but for what they implied. That intelligence was elitism. That policy was performance. That a girl from the Bronx didn't belong at the same table. And so she replied, her tone even, the air electric. "You're not a hillbilly, Senator. You went to Oxford. You just dress like one to hide your privilege." The room froze. That one sentence sparked a fire that leapt across Twitter, Facebook, cable news, and living rooms across the country. So outside the Capitol, the world divided like oil and water. Some called AOC arrogant, out of line. Others said she'd finally punctured a performance masquerading as populism. But what no one saw was what happened after the cameras shut off. Kennedy found her in the corridor later that day. She stood by a marble column texting. "You always come out swinging," he asked. She looked up. "Only when someone throws the first punch." There was a silence. "You're wrong about me," he said. "But I reckon I'm wrong about you, too." Alexandria raised an eyebrow. "That's surprisingly honest." "Well," he drawled, "even a blind hog finds an acorn sometimes." She smiled despite herself. And that was the first turning point. In the weeks that followed, something strange began to happen. Behind closed doors, the two began crossing paths more frequently, and not always by accident. In a private committee meeting on agricultural subsidies, they found themselves arguing the same side, opposing a corporate loophole that allowed billionaires to collect farm aid. "I thought you hated my TED Talks," she whispered as they walked out. "I said I hated the tone. he replied. Didn't say the substance was wrong. That moment, brief, almost forgettable, planted a seed neither expected to grow. At the same time, two subplots began to unfold that would test them both. The first involved a young whistleblower named Emma Rodriguez, an intern in the Department of Labor who had leaked documents revealing the quiet dismantling of OSHA workplace protections. She reached out to AOC anonymously, terrified. Alexandria, recognizing the weight of the information, knew she needed bipartisan support to expose it. The second subplot was more personal. Kennedy's wife, Rebecca, had been quietly battling early-onset Alzheimer's. The senator, known for his stoic facade, was beginning to unravel. He missed votes. He lost his train of thought mid-sentence. His folksy sayings became sharper, darker. He didn't tell anyone, until Alexandria confronted him. "You're not sleeping," she said one evening after a closed-door session. He looked away. "You ever love someone so much it hurts to breathe?" She nodded. "Every day since my father died." That night, something shifted. Together, they brought the OSHA scandal to light, working across party lines. Kennedy used his Southern charm to neutralize opposition. AOC used her media platform to amplify the truth. It was the unlikeliest alliance on the Hill. But the backlash came swiftly. Kennedy's base accused him of selling out. AOC's supporters questioned her judgment. They were called traitors, opportunists, actors in a political play. The final blow came during a live town hall, when a protester screamed at Kennedy, "Why are you working with a father?" And he answered, his voice cracking, "Because she listens. Because she's honest. Because, God help me, I've seen more courage in her than in a dozen Ivy League committees." The crowd went silent. The climax came not on the Hill, but at Rebecca Kennedy's funeral. She had passed quietly one morning, her hand in her husband's. Alexandria flew down to Louisiana unannounced. She wore a simple black dress, her hair in a low bun. The church was modest, filled with neighbors and lifelong friends. When she approached the casket, Kennedy met her eyes. "She liked you," he said. "You never told me that." She said, "You had fire. That you'd burn the rot out of Washington, or die trying." "I'm so sorry," she whispered. He just nodded. His face was a cracked dam. After the service, they sat on the porch of his family home. The air was thick with cicadas. He poured her a glass of sweet tea. "You know," he said, "you were right. I hide behind the hillbilly thing." She looked at him. "And I hide behind being the loudest in the room." They sat in silence. A breeze stirred the magnolia trees. "We're both masks," he said softly. "Just different ones." She didn't disagree. 2 months later, the media frenzy had long since moved on. But something remained, an unlikely friendship, rooted not in agreement but in mutual recognition. Kennedy went back to Louisiana for good. He didn't seek re-election. Alexandria continued her fiery crusades, but her tone changed, more reflective, more tempered. One night, in a podcast interview, she was asked about that infamous moment. "What did you mean, calling him out like that?" She smiled. "I meant that truth matters. But so does grace. What I didn't realize then is that sometimes people wear armor not to deceive, but to survive." The host was quiet, then asked, "And what would you say to him now?" Alexandria looked out the studio window. "I'd say thank you." And maybe that's the lesson. That beneath the sound bites and the shouting, the labels and the lines, we're not so different. We all wear masks. We all carry wounds. And sometimes, the greatest revolution isn't in tearing each other down, but in daring to understand. Even if it begins with a storm.